Officer Ryan Hale thought he had buried his past the day his canine partner Duke vanished without a trace. But on a cold morning in Silver Ridge, he was stunned to find a frail old veteran selling a German Shepherd for $20. The moment Ryan met the dog's eyes, his heart broke. It was Duke, the partner he had mourned for months, kidnapped while he was out of town visiting his mother. The veteran whispered that he had found the animal shot and bleeding, left for dead in a cemetery. What happens next will make you cry, and believe in miracles that walk on four legs. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Leave your country in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. The snow had fallen heavy over Silver Ridge, turning the little mountain town into a world of muted gray and white. Officer Ryan Hale, 36, stood by his patrol car near the farmer's market, the breath from his mouth a slow mist in the frigid air. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the short dark brown hair streaked with silver, and eyes the color of a winter storm. His Navy sheriff's jacket bore a thin crust of frost along the seams. For the past 3 months, Ryan had carried an ache he couldn't name, a hollow space left behind the day his canine partner Duke vanished. He'd gone back to his mother's home in Helena for a short visit, a rare weekend away from duty. When he returned, his house had been broken into, door splintered, glass shattered, a blood trail ending at the fence. Duke was gone. Investigators found nothing, no ransom, no leads. Ryan had buried a collar instead of a body and told himself to move on, though every patrol still felt like walking without a heartbeat. That morning, as he walked past the market, something unusual caught his eye. A makeshift sign nailed to a crooked fence post. Dog for sale, $20. The handwriting was shaky, the kind of letters drawn by someone with trembling hands. Sitting on a wooden crate beside the sign was an old man bundled in an army jacket faded by decades of sun and rain. His name, stitched above the breast pocket, read Arthur Blake. He was 67, thin from years of living alone, his gray beard ragged and his knuckles scarred. A wool cap barely covered his thinning hair. His eyes, a pale blue clouded with memories, drifted toward Ryan as he approached. Beside him, tethered to a short rope, lay a German Shepherd, its ribs faintly visible beneath a matted black and tan coat. The dog's head rested on its paws, unmoving, until Ryan's shadow fell across the snow. Slowly, the animal lifted its gaze. Ryan froze. The world seemed to narrow to that single pair of amber eyes, haunted, loyal, impossibly familiar. His chest tightened, breath catching in disbelief. "No," he whispered. "It can't be." Arthur blinked. "You know this dog?" His voice was gravelly, worn by cigarettes and sleepless nights. Ryan crouched, ignoring the sting of snow against his knees. "Duke?" he said softly. The shepherd's ears twitched at the sound of his name. The tail gave one faint thump, uncertain, but alive. Arthur shifted on his crate. "That's what you call him? I just been calling him Soldier." Ryan looked up. "Where did you get him?" The old man exhaled a slow cloud of breath, eyes fixed on the ground. "Found him 3 months back. I was at the cemetery up by Hillcrest visiting a buddy's grave. Snow was thick that day. Heard a whimper near the trees. Thought it was a coyote. But when I looked closer, I saw him. Bleeding bad, hole through the shoulder. Someone shot him, left him there to die. Took me near 2 hours to drag him to my truck." Ryan's throat closed. He could see the scar now, barely healed beneath the fur. "He was kidnapped," he murmured. "Someone broke into my place while I was gone. They wanted revenge." Arthur nodded slowly. "Figured it was something like that. He's a fighter, though. Stayed alive when most wouldn't, but—" He rubbed his temples. "I'm not right in the head these days. Got PTSD from the war. Sometimes I wake up shouting. I'm scared one night I'll hurt him without knowing it. He deserves someone steady." Ryan stared at him, torn between gratitude and sorrow. The veteran's words trembled with truth. Arthur reached into his coat and pulled out a small notebook, the pages stained from coffee and rain. "I wrote down when he started eating, when he walked again. Guess I was keeping score, didn't plan to sell him, but I thought maybe someone kind could give him better." Ryan took a shaky breath. "How much did you say?" $20, Arthur said quietly. "I ain't asking for charity, just enough for gas to get home." Ryan reached for his wallet with trembling hands. The $20 bill looked absurdly small between his fingers. He pressed it into Arthur's glove. "This isn't payment," he said hoarsely. "It's a thank you for saving my partner." Arthur looked at the bill, then at Ryan. You a cop? Yes, Ryan said. Sheriff's Department. He was my canine. The old man's face softened. Then he's yours, son. Always was. Ryan moved closer to Duke. The dog sniffed his hand, cautious as if testing the memory. When Ryan whispered, "You're home, buddy," Duke leaned forward, pressing his head against his chest. Ryan's arms wrapped around the dog, his gloves sinking into coarse fur. For the first time in months, warmth broke through the numbness. Around them, snow drifted in silent flakes. Arthur rose slowly, his knees cracking beneath his weight. "Guess I should head out," he said. "Good to see him with someone who remembers how to smile." Ryan looked up, eyes wet. "You could come by the station sometime. We train service dogs there. Maybe. You'd like to help." Arthur gave a faint, uncertain smile. "Maybe. Been a while since anyone wanted my help." He turned to a teenage boy standing a few yards away, half hidden behind a row of crates. "Eli, grab the box, will ya?" The boy hesitated, then stepped forward. Eli, about 14, with a patched winter coat and hair that refused to stay combed, clutched a cardboard box filled with old dog blankets. His eyes darted between the men, too young to understand, too old to pretend not to feel. Ryan noticed how the boy's boots were worn thin, the toes taped with gray duct tape. "Yours?" Arthur shook his head. "Kid helps me out sometimes. Sleeps at the church shelter. World's tough on strays. 2-legged and 4. Eli set the box down near Ryan. "He likes this one best," he said shyly, holding up a torn blue blanket. "Used to sleep on it every night." Ryan smiled faintly. "Then he'll have it back." Arthur extended a rough hand. Ryan took it firmly. "Thank you," he said, "for not walking away." Arthur's eyes glistened. "Guess we both found something worth saving." Ryan loaded Duke gently into the back seat of his patrol car. The dog whimpered softly, resting his head on the window frame as if watching to make sure the old man was still there. Arthur lifted a trembling hand in farewell. Eli stood beside him, watching the cruiser roll away, exhaust swirling like ghosts in the cold air. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Eli whispered, "Why was he crying?" Arthur's gaze stayed on the road. "Because, kid, sometimes when you lose hope long enough and it walks back to you on 4 legs, you don't know whether to cry or thank God first." Snow fell harder then, wrapping the market in white silence. The crooked sign fluttered once in the wind, and the words, "Dog for sale, $20, faded beneath the snow. Ryan drove through the winding road toward his cabin, Duke's soft breathing filling the car. His hands shook on the wheel, not from cold, but from disbelief. He looked at the dog in the rearview mirror, those amber eyes still watching him, as if afraid he might disappear again. "Not this time, partner," Ryan whispered. "You're safe now." Duke's tail thumped once against the seat. The road climbed toward the hills where the sun broke faintly through the clouds, casting a thin band of light over the snow-covered valley. For the first time since that terrible night 3 months ago, Ryan Hale felt something he hadn't dared to feel. Peace. Fragile, but real. And though he didn't yet know it, that $20 miracle would soon uncover the darkness that had stolen Duke away. The road to Ryan's cabin wound through the pine-covered hills like a trail of silver veins under the fading winter sun. Snow lined the shoulders, untouched except for the thin tracks left by his patrol car. Duke lay curled on the back seat, wrapped in a faded blue blanket Arthur had given him. Each bump in the road made the dog stir softly, a faint sound of breath escaping his muzzle. Ryan glanced in the rearview mirror every few seconds, afraid that if he looked away too long, the miracle he'd just witnessed might vanish. When he finally pulled up to the cabin, a sturdy timber house on the edge of Silver Ridge, the place felt frozen in time. The porch still carried the bite marks Duke had left as a puppy. The old metal bowl sat by the steps, half buried under snow. Ryan parked the car, stepped out, and the crunch of snow under his boots echoed in the quiet woods. The sky had turned amber gray, the last light catching on the icicles hanging from the roof. He opened the back door. "We're home, partner," he murmured. Duke lifted his head slowly, eyes dull with fatigue but glinting faintly with recognition. Ryan helped him down, one arm under his chest, the other supporting his hind leg. The dog limped slightly but refused to whimper. They walked up the porch together, one man, one survivor, and pushed through the creaking door. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and dust. The photographs on the mantel hadn't been touched since Duke disappeared. Snapshots of training days, missions, the two of them standing proud beside the patrol truck. Ryan knelt and touched the frayed leash hanging by the wall. It was still looped where he'd last left it, waiting for a walk that never came. Duke sniffed the corners of the room, tail low, uncertain. When he reached his old bed, a circular pad near the fireplace, he paused, then turned in a slow circle before lowering himself into it. The sigh that left his body carried months of exhaustion. Ryan crouched beside him, tracing a hand along the healed scar near the shoulder. "You've been through hell, boy," he whispered, "but you made it back." The next morning, Ryan drove Duke to the Silver Ridge Veterinary Clinic. The clinic was run by Dr. Melinda Price, a woman in her late 40s, sharp-eyed but kind, with a steady, professional grace. She wore a quilted gray coat and kept her hair tied back in a neat ponytail. She'd worked with the department's canine units for years and had been there the night they declared Duke missing in action. When she saw them enter, her clipboard slipped from her hand. "Good Lord! Ryan, is that—" "Yeah," he said, voice rough. "It's him." Melinda knelt, her expression softening as Duke's tail tapped the floor once. "He looks thin, but the eyes are the same. Let's see what's left of that old stubborn heart." For nearly an hour, she examined him, stethoscope against fur, gentle hands tracing scars. The X-ray revealed a bullet wound through the right shoulder, long since healed but dangerously close to the bone. "He was lucky," she said. "Whoever shot him knew what they were doing, but whoever patched him up probably saved his life." Ryan thought of Arthur, hunched against the cold with shaking hands. "A veteran found him," he said quietly. "Said he pulled him out of the snow." Melinda smiled faintly. "Seems Duke's loyalty rubs off on people." When they returned home that evening, snow had started again, soft flakes tumbling through the twilight. Ryan laid a fresh blanket near the fire and made a simple dinner, chicken broth and rice for Duke, black coffee for himself. He ate sitting on the floor, one hand resting on the dog's back. The rhythmic rise and fall of Duke's breathing steadied him in a way no prayer ever had. Later, Ryan lit the wood stove and opened his mail. Among the bills and routine reports, there was an envelope with uneven handwriting. The return address read, Arthur Blake, Hillcrest Road. Inside was a short letter on lined paper. "Officer Hale, I'm not much for writing, but I wanted you to know I slept easy last night for the first time in months. Seeing that dog in your arms felt like something right in a world that's gone wrong too many times. I don't have much to give, but I left a small brass tag under the blanket in case it means something to him. Take care of him. You both look like you've carried too much weight for one winter. Arthur Blake." Ryan turned the envelope upside down, and a small, round tag fell onto the table. It was Duke's old military ID tag, bent but legible. How Arthur had found it was a mystery, but Ryan clipped it back onto Duke's collar where it belonged. That night, he dreamed again of the day he lost Duke. He remembered the faint metallic scent of blood on the floorboards, the broken back door swinging in the wind. He'd knelt there, calling Duke's name until his throat gave out. When the sun rose, he'd sworn vengeance, but vengeance had turned into grief, and grief into numb silence. He woke to the sound of soft whimpers. Duke was standing at the door, tail twitching. Ryan followed his gaze out of the window. Snow blanketed the yard, and across the driveway, faint boot prints led toward the tree line, fresh, crisp, too large to be his own. His pulse quickened. He stepped onto the porch, scanning the woods. Nothing moved but the snowflakes. "Probably just a hiker," he muttered, though the unease lingered. He made a mental note to check the security cameras he'd installed months ago. Inside, Duke had settled again, head resting on his paws. Ryan sat on the couch, watching the firelight flicker over the walls. The warmth of the cabin mixed with the scent of old pine, yet the air carried a quiet tension, like the mountain was holding its breath. He glanced at the clock. Midnight. Outside, wind hissed through the trees. He reached for the letter again, reading Arthur's shaky handwriting under the firelight. The words, "something right in a world that's gone wrong," stayed with him. Ryan realized he hadn't felt that kind of rightness in years, not since before the shooting, before the case that took Duke away. He didn't know it yet, but the past had begun to stir again, its shadow stretching long over the snow. For now, though, he leaned back, watching Duke sleep, and whispered, "You're home, partner. That's all that matters tonight." The wind howled softly outside, carrying the scent of snow and pine through the cracks in the window. Inside, man and dog rested side by side, the lost finding the lost. The night in Silver Ridge was so still that even the pines seemed to hold their breath. A thin crescent moon hung above the frozen valley, its light glinting off the snow like shards of glass. Inside the cabin, the only sound was the soft crackle of fire and Duke's steady breathing. Ryan Hale sat by the window, flipping through Arthur's letter again. Something about the veteran's tone haunted him, an unease that seemed to linger between the lines. Then came the sound. A faint crunch outside. Slow, deliberate. Ryan's instincts flared instantly. He reached for his flashlight and sidearm from the mantel. The noise came again, closer this time, boots pressing into the snow just beyond the porch. Duke's ears perked up, a low growl vibrating from his throat. "Easy, boy," Ryan whispered, his breath fogging the glass. He killed the lights, cracked the door open, and stepped out into the freezing dark. The air bit against his face. His beam swept across the yard, nothing but white and shadow. Yet the prints were there, large, deep, leading from the tree line to the back fence. Ryan crouched, studying them. The pattern was military grade. Heavy boots, likely tactical issue. Whoever had been here wasn't some lost hiker. He followed the trail as far as the woods, where it disappeared beneath fresh snowfall. Duke stood beside him, sniffing, tail stiff, nose twitching. The dog suddenly barked once, sharp and alert, pointing toward the slope near the creek. But before Ryan could follow, a distant engine revved, a truck speeding away somewhere down the mountain road. He clenched his jaw. "They're watching us." The next morning he collected a plaster cast of the footprint, sealed it in a forensic bag, and drove it to the Silver Ridge Police Department, a modest two-story brick building surrounded by patrol SUVs crusted with salt and ice. Inside, the warm air carried the scent of stale coffee and wet uniforms. His old friend, Detective Laura Finch, looked up from her desk when he walked in. Laura was in her early 40s, sharp-featured and wiry, with sandy blonde hair cut short and practical. She had the dry humor of someone who'd seen too many crime scenes and too few happy endings. Her flannel shirt was half-tucked, a badge clipped at her belt beside a holstered revolver. "Ryan," she said, leaning back. "You look like you haven't slept since Nam." "Found something outside my cabin last night," he replied, setting the evidence bag on her desk. "Footprints. Pattern looks tactical." Laura raised an eyebrow. "Tactical? As in ex-military?" "As in familiar," he said quietly. "Check it against the canine trafficking case from 3 months ago, the one that went cold after their leader escaped." Laura's humor vanished. "The Crossfield crew?" He nodded. "I think they're back, and I think they came for Duke." Laura took the bag, her expression hardening. "You realize if you're right, it means they never stopped hunting." "I know." She promised to rush the analysis and call him with results. As Ryan turned to leave, she added, "And Ryan, keep your doors locked. People like them don't miss twice." That night, the report came through. Ryan sat by the fire, phone pressed to his ear as Laura's voice came crackling through the line. "You were right. The print matches one of the Crossfield crew, Sergeant Paul Danner. He was confirmed dead after the raid, but looks like someone used his old boots or—" She hesitated. "Or he's alive." Ryan's grip tightened. "He's the one who shot Duke." Laura sighed. "If they're circling back, it's personal. They must have known Duke survived." He ended the call, staring into the flames. Duke lifted his head, sensing his master's unease. Ryan reached down to stroke his fur. "We're not running this time, partner." Meanwhile, across town, Arthur Blake sat by the window of his small cabin on Hillcrest Road. The wind moaned outside, rattling the thin panes. His hands shook slightly as he refilled his pipe, the tobacco trembling between his fingers. Every sudden noise made him flinch. The creak of a branch, the backfire of a truck. His breathing grew shallow. From the corner, Eli, the teenage boy who often stayed with him, watched silently. He had been reading old medical pamphlets he found at the church, trying to understand the word PTSD. The descriptions made him frown. Nightmares, flashbacks, guilt, hypervigilance. It sounded like Arthur exactly. "Mr. Blake?" Eli said gently. "You okay?" Arthur blinked, pulling himself back to the room. "Yeah, kid. Just ghosts walking through my head." Eli closed the book. "That's the thing they call PTSD, right? The war stuff?" Arthur gave a bitter chuckle. They call it a lot of things. Back then we just called it being broken. Eli hesitated. Maybe you're not broken. Maybe you just need to know you did something good, like saving Duke. Arthur looked at the boy for a long moment. You got more faith than I ever did. He forced a smile. Go on, get some sleep. But when Eli went to his cot, Arthur sat awake, eyes darting to the window. Outside, down the dark road, headlights flashed once, then vanished. His chest tightened. Something was wrong. The next day, Ryan returned to patrol duty, though his mind wasn't on the routine. Each radio call felt distant. The town looked peaceful on the surface, children building snowmen near storefronts, the bakery window glowing amber, but he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. At dusk, as he drove past the old cemetery on Hillcrest, Duke suddenly barked. Ryan slowed the cruiser, headlights sweeping over the snow. There, near one of the newer headstones, was a crude cross of branches, the same spot where Arthur said he'd found Duke. He stepped out, snow crunching under his boots. The wind carried a faint, metallic smell, like gun, oil. Beside the cross lay something half-buried, a cigarette butt, still fresh, with a distinct red filter. Ryan pocketed it. Back in the car, Duke whined softly, nose pressed to the window. Ryan patted his head. Good catch, boy. Someone was here. That night, in his cabin, he laid the cigarette on the table beside the plaster cast. Together, they told a story. Someone from the Crossfield crew had been circling back to their old sins. He turned to Duke, who had drifted into sleep by the fire, and whispered, They think they can finish what they started, but not while I'm breathing. Outside, snow began to fall again, erasing the tracks of men who hunted in the dark. In another part of Silver Ridge, Eli sat at Arthur's bedside, reading aloud from an old dog care manual he found. It says animals remember kindness, he murmured. That's how they heal. Arthur, half asleep, smiled faintly. Maybe people do too, kid. Eli glanced out the frosted window. Somewhere far off, a lone dog barked into the cold, and the boy wondered if miracles ever really ended, or if they just found new places to hide. Morning came pale and gray over Silver Ridge, the kind of light that never quite felt like day. Frost clung to the windows of the police station, and a thin fog coiled low over the streets. Inside, Officer Ryan Hale stood at his desk reviewing the photos of the cigarette butt and the plaster cast. His mind replayed the sounds from that night, the engine fading into the distance, the eerie silence afterward. The Crossfield crew wasn't just a ghost from his past anymore. They were back, and they were close. As he was packing up evidence for the next step of the investigation, the front door creaked open. An older man stepped inside, the kind whose presence drew quiet rather than attention. Arthur Blake stood in the entryway, his army coat buttoned up to the neck, snow melting off his boots. His eyes were heavy with fatigue, but there was something determined in his posture. In one gloved hand he held a small, cloth-wrapped bundle. "Morning, officer," Arthur said, his voice hoarse. "I thought I'd bring this to you. Found it near where I pulled Duke out that day." Ryan's pulse quickened. He motioned for Arthur to sit. "What is it?" Arthur unwrapped the bundle carefully. Inside lay a single brass shell casing, dull with frost and dirt. "Picked it up 2 days ago," Arthur continued. "Didn't think much of it until the kid, Eli, said maybe it meant something. I went back and checked. The markings look military." Ryan took the casing in his hand, squinting at the base. He knew the brand instantly. "SIG 9mm, the same type we recovered in the Crossfield K9 case." Arthur nodded grimly. Didn't figure graveyards were the kind of place for gunfights, unless somebody wanted to hide a sin where no one looks. Ryan felt the words like a weight. "Arthur," he said slowly, "I think whoever left this wanted Duke dead, and if they dumped him there, it wasn't random." Arthur's eyes flicked up. "Then we better go see the place again." Ryan hesitated. "It's not safe." Arthur smirked faintly. "Wasn't safe the first time, either." An hour later, Ryan's patrol truck rumbled up the snow-covered road toward Hillcrest Cemetery. The world outside was a wash of white, the trees heavy with frost. In the back seat sat Eli, bundled in a puffy green jacket 2 sizes too big, his cheeks red from the cold. "You sure it's okay for me to come?" he asked. Arthur looked back at him, his tone gentle but firm. "You wanted to learn how to face ghosts, right? Well, this is where they live." Ryan glanced at the boy through the rearview mirror. "You stay close to me and Duke, understood?" Eli nodded, clutching Duke's leash in his mittened hands. The cemetery appeared out of the mist like something carved from bone. Rows of crooked headstones, patches of snow-covered earth, and a wind that seemed to hum with the voices of the past. Ryan parked at the gate and the three stepped out. The air smelled faintly of pine resin and metal. Arthur led them past the older graves toward the northern slope. His breath came in slow, visible puffs. "Was about here," he murmured, pointing to a patch of disturbed snow, "right where that broken oak is." Ryan knelt, brushing away frost. The ground beneath was hard, packed, but he could still see faint discoloration, old blood stains mixed with earth. "He must have been dumped right here," he said quietly. "Shot. Left to die." Arthur crouched beside him. "I remember now. There was a truck, black, older model, parked by the gate when I got here. Thought it was just another mourner." Ryan's head snapped up. "Did you see the plate?" Arthur shook his head. "Too dark, but I remember the back bumper had a sticker. Something red, shaped like a cross with a circle around it." Ryan felt a chill crawl up his neck. "That's the insignia of the Crossfield unit. It's them." A cold gust swept through the cemetery, rattling the brittle branches. Duke stood alert, nose twitching. Suddenly, he barked once and began to dig near a half-buried log. Ryan and Arthur hurried over. Beneath the layer of snow, Duke unearthed a torn piece of leather, a glove stiff from the cold, with the initials PD burned faintly near the wrist. Ryan's eyes narrowed. Paul Danner, the sergeant who led the trafficking ring. Arthur straightened slowly. "You think he's back?" "I think he never left," Ryan said. "He's been here all along." For a long moment they stood in silence, the only sound the whistle of the wind and the scrape of Duke's paws against the frozen ground. Eli, who had been lingering near the truck, came running over. "Mr. Hale, someone's out there!" He pointed to the tree line. A flicker of movement, just a shadow, but enough for Ryan's instincts to ignite. "Get in the truck," he barked. Arthur grabbed Eli by the arm and pulled him toward safety. Ryan drew his weapon, moving low through the snow. He caught sight of a figure vanishing between the pines, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark parka. By the time he reached the ridge, the man was gone, but fresh boot prints led away toward the valley road. He crouched and touched the prints. The same pattern again, tactical, consistent. When he returned, Arthur had Duke sitting protectively in front of the boy. "Whoever it was, they're still watching us," Ryan said. Arthur's jaw tightened. "Then they know you're onto them. They also know I'm not backing down." Ryan stood, his voice steady but cold. "I'll find every one of them, Arthur. I swear it on the ground your brothers rest in." Arthur nodded, eyes misting. "Then let me help. You saved my conscience when you took that dog. Maybe it's time I save something back." Ryan looked at him for a long moment before answering quietly, "Then we start tomorrow." As they turned to leave, Duke glanced once more at the spot where he'd been found, months ago. His tail lowered, ears twitching. Eli knelt and stroked his fur. "It's okay, buddy," the boy whispered. "You're safe now." Duke responded by nudging his shoulder gently before walking beside him. That night, back at Arthur's cabin, Eli couldn't sleep. The image of that shadow in the woods clung to him. Duke had been allowed to stay with them for a few days while Ryan prepared his next move. The dog slept beside the boy's cot, warm and still. Eli whispered into the darkness, "Hey, Duke, you think ghosts get tired?" The only reply was a soft sigh from the dog, followed by the quiet rhythm of his breathing. The sound eased Eli's heartbeat until he drifted to sleep. For the first time in years, he didn't wake from nightmares. And, in the next room, Arthur sat by the window, staring out at the snow under the moonlight. He'd seen too much death in his life to believe in miracles. Yet somehow, that German shepherd lying on the floor reminded him that some souls return not to haunt, but to heal. Outside, the wind carried the faint echo of Ryan's vow across the valley, a promise whispered into the cold that no man or beast would be forgotten. The storm rolled into Silver Ridge like a beast crawling down from the mountains, the sky bruised and heavy with snow. By late afternoon, the roads were empty except for Ryan Hale's patrol truck cutting through the drifts toward the old mining valley north of town. The cemetery investigation had confirmed one thing. Paul Danner, presumed dead, was alive. The glove Duke had found wasn't just a remnant, it was a message. And messages, Ryan knew, were meant to be answered. The abandoned mining district stretched for miles, a forgotten scar from Silver Ridge's gold rush years. Old shafts gaped like wounds in the earth, and decaying wooden shacks leaned beneath the weight of snow. It was here that Ryan had followed a faint lead. A supply truck seen making night runs toward this area, registered under a fake company name once tied to Danner's crew. Ryan parked behind a ridge of pines, killed the engine, and listened. The wind hissed across the frozen ground. Duke sat beside him in the passenger seat, alert but calm, his breath misting against the window. "You ready, partner?" Ryan whispered. Duke's tail tapped once. Ryan stepped out, pulling his dark patrol jacket tighter, the badge glinting faintly in the dim light. His boots crunched through the snow as he approached the largest of the old structures, a log cabin whose roof sagged under years of neglect. From the outside it looked dead, but the faint hum of a generator whispered otherwise. He crouched low, scanning the perimeter. Faint boot prints led from the door to the side of the cabin, and smoke drifted from a rusted chimney. He unhooked a small recorder from his belt, pressed the red button, and slipped it beneath the side window. Then he peeked through a gap in the boards. Inside, a dim lantern flickered over a crude table. 3 men sat around it, faces obscured by shadows. Ryan recognized one immediately. The scar that cut across his cheek was unmistakable. Paul Danner, mid-40s, ex-military, broad frame, shaved head, wearing a torn tactical coat. The man had once been decorated for valor before his dishonorable discharge for illegal arms dealing. Danner's voice came muffled through the window. "We wait until he's alone. The dog won't leave his side, but every animal has a weakness. Pain." The other men chuckled darkly. Ryan's pulse thundered. He adjusted his angle, and that was when he saw it, a wall behind them covered in photographs. He squinted through the fogged glass until one image caught his eye. Duke, chained to a steel post, muzzle streaked with blood, eyes wide and terrified. Another photo showed bullet holes lined up in a wooden board, each numbered as if someone had used him for target conditioning. A sharp pain struck Ryan's chest. He gritted his teeth, steadying his breath. Rage rose like bile, but training kept him still. He pulled out his phone and began snapping photos silently through the crack. Inside, Danner's men kept talking. One of them, a wiry man with a beanie and an untrimmed beard, probably in his 30s, laughed. "He's got no idea we've been watching him. The old vet, too. Guy's jumpy as hell. Probably won't last long if we spook him." Ryan's stomach tightened. They were watching Arthur. He leaned closer, recording every word. But a sudden creak betrayed him, the shift of a plank beneath his boot. One of the men's heads jerked toward the window. "Did you hear that?" Ryan ducked low, heart hammering. A door burst open. Flashlight beams cut across the snow. "Who's out there?" Danner's voice barked. Ryan slid behind the cabin wall, signaling Duke to stay low. The dog moved silently, years of canine training returning like instinct. When the men came around the corner, Ryan was already gone, circling through the pines toward his truck. He climbed in quietly, waited until their lights disappeared, and started the engine just enough to let the wind cover the sound. Back on the road, his hands shook with restrained fury. He gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. "They hurt you, buddy," he whispered to Duke. "They hurt you, and now they're hunting others. Not again." Duke let out a low whine, his head pressing gently against Ryan's shoulder. The officer exhaled, fighting the tremor in his voice. "We'll stop them. I promise." Back in town, night had fallen completely. Snow blanketed the rooftops, and the lamplight glowed golden through the storm. At the small cabin on Hillcrest, Arthur and Eli sat by a sputtering fire. The wind rattled the windows, making the thin glass tremble. Arthur was lost in thought, his pipe resting unused beside him. Eli, curious as ever, broke the silence. "Mr. Blake, what was it like in the war?" Arthur didn't answer right away. He stared into the flames. "Loud," he said finally. "Not just the guns. The silence after. That's what stays with you. The quiet after someone you trust doesn't answer back." Eli listened carefully. "You lost someone, didn't you?" Arthur nodded slowly. "My best friend. Name was Tom Shepard. We grew up together, joined the same unit. But when things got rough, I started doubting him. Thought he'd crack under pressure. I kept my distance. The night we got ambushed, he pushed me out of the blast zone, saved my life, died doing it." He sighed, voice trembling. "Sometimes I think mistrust killed him as much as the bullet." Eli sat quietly for a moment. Then he said softly, "You trust Duke, don't you?" Arthur blinked, surprised. Course I do. Then maybe that means you still trust yourself. Just a little. The old man chuckled, the sound low and warm. You got a wise head for a kid. Eli shrugged, stroking Duke, who was now lying between them. He helps me sleep, Eli said. Before, I used to hear things in the dark, sirens, voices, but when he's here, I just hear his breathing. Arthur looked at the boy, his heart softening. Guess we're both learning to sleep again. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Later that night, Ryan returned to his cabin. He transferred the audio from the recorder onto his computer, listening to Danner's voice over and over. Each word cut deeper, every laugh a reminder of the cruelty that had nearly killed his partner. But hidden near the end of the tape, just before the noise faded, a phrase caught his ear. The shipment moves through the old quarry, 2 nights from now. If Hale gets in the way, bury him there. Ryan leaned back, staring at the glowing screen. So that was their next move. He pulled up the photographs he'd taken. There was one image he couldn't stop staring at. The picture of Duke, chained and bleeding, eyes still defiant. Beneath it, scrawled in black ink, were 3 words. Still your dog? Ryan's jaw tightened. He reached for his badge and set it beside the photo. You're damn right he is, he whispered. The fire popped in the hearth, a spark leaping high before fading to ember. Outside, the storm wailed over the valley, but inside the cabin, the officer and his dog sat side by side in silence, 2 souls bound by scars, waiting for justice to thaw. The snowstorm broke at dawn, leaving the mountains of Silver Ridge washed in pale light and silence. Ryan Hale stood by his truck outside the police station, the breath in his chest forming small ghosts of steam. The air was sharp, carrying the metallic tang of cold iron. His mind hadn't rested since listening to that recording. 2 nights, they'd said, before the shipment at the quarry. Today was that second night. He adjusted his tactical vest, checking his gear one last time. Beside him stood Detective Laura Finch, dressed in black winter armor, heavy boots, reinforced jacket, radio pinned to her shoulder. Her blonde hair was tied in a tight braid under her cap, and her gray eyes were all focus. You sure about this? She asked. That valley's a graveyard for good plans. Ryan gave a small nod. If we wait any longer, they'll vanish again. This time, we end it. Laura exhaled, tapping her rifle. Then we move quiet and fast. Sheriff's office is setting perimeter teams on the east ridge. You and I take the south approach. Ryan looked down at Duke, who was sitting at his side, muscles taut, eyes locked on the tree line. He's ready. Let's hope we all are, Laura murmured. The convoy of 3 police vehicles wound up the narrow road toward the abandoned quarry. Snow whipped across the windshield, and the tires crunched over frozen gravel. As they reached the ridge, Ryan signaled for the engines to cut. The world fell into silence except for the whispering wind through the pines. They advanced on foot, radios low, boots sinking in the snow. Ryan's breath came slow, steady. The old mining yard below was half buried under drifts, rusted trucks, and steel drums scattered like bones. From the distance, a single cabin near the edge of the pit gave off a faint glow. That's our nest, Ryan said quietly into his radio. Everyone, hold position. He raised his binoculars. Through the frosted lens he caught movement. 3 men near the cabin, rifles slung, loading crates into a covered truck. Laura crouched beside him. That's them, all right. You take point, I'll flank right. But before they could move, Duke stiffened, ears pricking up. A low growl rumbled from his chest. Ryan froze, trusting the instinct he had learned never to ignore. A faint click echoed behind them. Down! Ryan shouted. Gunfire erupted from the ridge above. Bullets ripped through the air, slicing the snow around them. Ryan rolled behind a boulder, pulling Duke close. Laura returned fire, her rifle cracking through the storm. They knew we were coming, she yelled. Ryan peered over the rock, eyes scanning the tree line. Shadows shifted among the pines, men in dark coats moving fast, disciplined. Danner's crew. A round tore into the snow inches from his hand. Ryan ducked back. They're surrounding us. They've got the high ground. He switched channels. Team Alpha, push south. We're under fire. Static answered. Then silence. Laura grimaced. They're jamming comms. Another burst of shots rang out. One round grazed Ryan's shoulder, tearing through his jacket. The sting burned hot and sudden. He gritted his teeth, pressing a hand over the wound. Just a scratch, he hissed. Then Duke bolted forward. Duke, no! Ryan yelled. But the shepherd was already gone, darting through the snow like a shadow, weaving between trees toward the flash of gunfire. A scream split the air. One of Danner's men tumbled from the ridge, his rifle skidding away. Duke had lunged, teeth clamped on the man's arm, pulling him down with raw force. The dog barked once, a deep, echoing sound that seemed to shake the forest itself. Ryan and Laura used the opening to move. They advanced low, firing controlled bursts. The fight became chaos, muzzle flashes, shouts, snow exploding under the storm of bullets. Then, through the smoke, Ryan saw him. Paul Danner, standing near the cabin, rifle raised, his face twisted with rage. The scar across his cheek looked deeper under the cold light. "You should have stayed out of this, Hale!" he shouted. Ryan fired, but Danner ducked and returned a volley. Bullets cracked against the metal drum beside him. Ryan dove behind cover. Duke, bloodied but unbroken, ran to his side. Laura called from across the yard, "Two left, near the truck." She fired, dropping one. The last man tried to flee toward the vehicle but slipped on the icy ground. Ryan saw his chance. He sprinted toward Danner's position, snow spraying beneath his boots. Danner fired again. One bullet grazed Ryan's shoulder where it had already been hit. He stumbled, but kept moving. Duke lunged forward, striking Danner from the side. The rifle flew into the snow. They rolled, man and beast, a blur of motion. Danner screamed as Duke's jaws closed around his wrist. Ryan reached them, kicking the gun away and wrenching Danner to the ground. "It's over," he growled, pressing the muzzle of his sidearm to the man's chest. Danner sneered through bloodied lips. "You think you've won? There'll always be more like me." "Then I'll be waiting," Ryan said. He cuffed him hard, reading him his rights as the sirens of backup units finally echoed through the valley. Laura approached, breathless, rifle lowered. "You okay?" Ryan nodded. Better than him. He looked at Duke, who sat in the snow panting, his fur streaked with crimson. But it wasn't his own. "He saved my life again," Ryan said softly, kneeling beside him. Duke nudged his hand, tail thumping weakly. By the time the other units arrived, the shootout was over. 4 suspects down, 2 in custody, including Danner. The quarry was silent except for the hum of idling engines and the faint wail of the wind. As medics checked Ryan's shoulder, he turned to watch Duke resting near the patrol truck, blanket draped over him. His partner's eyes were, half closed, calm. "You did good, boy," he whispered. Back in town, news of the firefight reached Hillcrest quickly. Inside the small cabin, Arthur Blake dropped the mug from his hand when he heard the radio report. "Shots fired near the Silver Ridge quarry. Multiple suspects detained. K-9 officer wounded, but stable." "Duke," he breathed. Eli, sitting by the window, looked up. "They said he's okay, right?" Arthur didn't answer. He grabbed his coat and keys, his old boots thudding across the floor. "Come on, kid." They drove through the snow, headlights cutting through the mist. When they arrived, the quarry was sealed off by cruisers and flashing lights. Arthur's chest tightened at the sight of stretchers being loaded. He pushed past the tape until he saw Ryan standing beside the truck. "Ryan!" he called out. The officer turned, surprised. "Arthur, what are you—" But Arthur didn't let him finish. His eyes had already found Duke, lying in the back of the truck under a thermal blanket, tail flicking lazily. The old man's lips quivered. He reached out a trembling hand, brushing Duke's fur. "He's alive," Arthur whispered, voice breaking. Ryan smiled faintly. "Takes more than bullets to stop him." Arthur turned away, tears freezing on his cheeks. "I've seen too many men die in front of me. Never thought I'd see something live and make me believe again." Eli stood beside him, watching Duke's chest rise and fall. For the first time in a long while, the boy saw Arthur's face at peace. Snow began to fall again, soft and silent, covering the crimson stains of battle. In the distance, the valley lights flickered like stars, and for that one fragile night, Silver Ridge finally slept without fear. The snow outside the Silver Ridge Sheriff's Office had begun to melt, dripping from the eaves in slow, rhythmic beats. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered above the interrogation room, their cold glow washing everything in sterile gray. Paul Danner sat at the metal table, wrists cuffed, his once proud posture slumped but not broken. His head was shaved close, revealing an old scar above the temple. His tactical jacket had been replaced by an orange detention uniform, and yet his eyes still carried the same venom Ryan had seen back at the quarry. Detective Laura Finch stood beside the two-way mirror, arms crossed. Ryan sat opposite Danner, elbows on the table, his left shoulder bandaged from the gunshot. He said nothing at first. The silence stretched, broken only by the faint hum of the ceiling vent. Finally, Danner smirked. "You always were predictable, Hale. Brave enough to show up, dumb enough to care." Ryan's jaw tightened. "You've got one chance to talk. Make it count." Danner leaned back in his chair, the cuffs clinking softly. "Talk? Oh, I'll talk. Hell, I've been waiting years for this moment. You remember Carson City, 2018? That warehouse raid?" Ryan frowned. "The K-9 trafficking sting." "Yeah," Danner said, grin widening. "That was my operation. You stormed in with your fancy badge and your perfect mutt, took down my team, and sent me to rot. You ruined everything. I had connections, military, private buyers, half the market under my hand. You made me a ghost." Ryan's eyes narrowed. "You mean we shut down your animal torture ring? You were selling service dogs to gangs, Danner. They weren't yours to profit from." Danner's grin faltered for a moment, then twisted back. "Call it what you want. Those dogs were tools. You broke the deal, Hale. You embarrassed me. So, when I heard you'd gone home for a few days, I figured I'd send a little message." Ryan's stomach turned. "You broke into my house." "Not me," Danner said. "My boys. They found that shepherd of yours sitting by the door like a good little soldier, loyal to the end." He paused, studying Ryan's face. "We took him. Thought we'd train him to hunt you, Poetic Justice, right? But he was too loyal. He fought back. Bit two of my men before I shot him myself. Left him bleeding in that graveyard for you to find." The room fell silent. Even Laura's hand froze on her notepad. Ryan's eyes dropped to the table, his fists clenching. For a moment, the sound of wind outside filled the gap between words. "You shot him," Ryan said quietly. Danner tilted his head. "Didn't kill him, though. Guess even the devil didn't want him. Or maybe something else did." Ryan rose slowly, the chair legs scraping against the concrete. He walked to the window, his reflection staring back from the glass. He took a deep breath, then turned around. His voice, when it came, was low but steady. "You know what's funny, Danner? You did everything to destroy him. But he survived. You tried to erase loyalty, and instead you proved it stronger than hate." Danner sneered. "Save the sermon for the papers." Ryan stepped closer, his shadow falling over the table. "No, I'll save it for the next K-9 we train in his honor. Every time one of them saves a life, you'll know you lost." Danner's smirk faltered at last. "You think that mutt forgives you for what you put him through?" Ryan crouched slightly, meeting his eyes. "I don't think he needs to forgive me, because Duke doesn't carry hate the way you do. That's the difference between animals and monsters." Laura tapped the glass twice, a signal that time was up. Ryan straightened, giving Danner one last look before walking out. Outside the interrogation room, Laura followed. "That's enough, Ryan. We've got his confession recorded. He'll never see daylight again." Ryan nodded absently. "That's not what I wanted." "Then what did you want?" "To understand how people lose their humanity." Laura sighed. "Maybe it's not your job to understand it. Maybe it's your job to stop it." He didn't answer. Through the narrow window, he could see Duke waiting in the hallway, alert, tail wagging softly. The sight cracked the tension inside him. He knelt and ran a hand along the shepherd's neck. "They couldn't kill it, could they?" he whispered. "Not the loyalty, not the light." Duke pressed his head into Ryan's hand, eyes calm and forgiving. Later that afternoon, Ryan sat at his desk writing the final report. The clock ticked steadily above him. His shoulder throbbed, but the pain felt distant, dulled by the quiet weight of closure. He looked at the old photo pinned on the board. Him and Duke in uniform, years younger, proud, and unstoppable. He placed the new case file beside it, stamped closed in red ink. For the first time in months, he exhaled without shaking. At Hillcrest Cabin, the light from the wood stove flickered against the walls. Arthur was fixing Eli's coat near the fire while the boy sat at the small wooden table, writing in a worn notebook. Duke lay curled near his chair, eyes half closed. Eli looked up. "Mr. Blake, do you think dogs remember pain?" Arthur glanced over, thoughtful. "Maybe, but I think they remember love better. Why do you ask?" Eli smiled faintly. "Because I'm writing about Duke, about what happened. So kids will know that even when someone hurts you, it's still okay to protect them. That's what forgiveness looks like." Arthur blinked, surprised by the boy's quiet wisdom. "That's a good story to tell." Eli scribbled another line, his pencil scratching softly across the page. "I'll call it The Dog Who Chose to Forgive." Arthur chuckled. "Sounds like a story the world needs." Outside, the night deepened. Snow drifted gently past the window. Duke stirred, as if hearing his name, and rested his paw against Eli's foot. The boy looked down and smiled. "See? He agrees." In the distance, a faint siren echoed through the valley. One more criminal caught, one more wound closed. And in the cabin's warmth, man, boy, and dog shared the same silent truth, that sometimes the bravest kind of strength is choosing peace after the storm. Winter returned to Silver Ridge like an old ghost that refused to rest. The courthouse, a solemn red brick building in the center of town, stood under a gray sky heavy with snow. Reporters crowded the steps, their breaths forming clouds as cameras flashed and microphones jutted forward like bayonets. Inside, the air buzzed with quiet anticipation. The scent of paper, coffee, and wool coats filled the courtroom. Officer Ryan Hale sat at the witness bench, wearing his navy blue uniform, the badge polished to mirror brightness. His shoulder was still healing beneath the fabric, but his posture was steady. Beside his chair, Duke lay at his feet, tail curled, his fur gleaming under the courtroom lights. The scar along his flank was visible even through the sheen of his coat, a living mark of what they had survived together. The judge, Marion Keller, an older woman in her 60s with sharp features softened by kindness, presided over the trial. Her silver hair was tied neatly in a bun, and her gavel rested gently against her palm. To her right sat the jury. Farmers, teachers, townsfolk, their expressions grave as they listened to the murmurs of the case that had shaken their quiet valley. Across the room sat Paul Danner, the man whose crimes had finally been laid bare. His orange jumpsuit seemed to drain the last of his arrogance, though the glint of defiance still lingered in his eyes. His defense attorney, Miles Grayson, a weary man in his 50s with thinning hair and a rumpled gray suit, whispered something that Danner ignored. The prosecutor, Elaine Morris, stood poised at her table, mid-40s, tall, with dark hair cut clean at her shoulders and eyes that missed nothing. She adjusted her papers, then turned toward the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had seen too much injustice to be easily shaken. "Today, we close a story that began not with greed, but with cruelty. A man who saw loyalty as weakness and compassion as a weapon, but the very thing he tried to destroy, love, became the key to his downfall." She nodded toward Ryan and Duke. "You've all heard how Officer Hale's canine partner was kidnapped, shot, and left for dead. How a retired veteran found him, nursed him back to life, and how that same dog later helped uncover the evidence that brought this entire trafficking ring to justice." At that, the courtroom shifted. Every camera lens turned toward Duke. He raised his head slightly, alert but calm, as if understanding that this moment was his too. The prosecutor smiled faintly. "They called him a useless dog, but I call him what he truly is, a hero." Judge Keller nodded. "Proceed." Elaine turned to Ryan. "Officer Hale, could you please recount for the court how Duke's actions led to the arrest of the defendant?" Ryan cleared his throat. "After recovering Duke, I noticed his behavior changed. He'd growl at a certain scents. Metal oil, synthetic leather, all materials used in the smugglers' cages. We followed the trail to a cabin near the quarry, where Duke uncovered physical evidence linking Danner to the ring. Without him, we would have had nothing solid." Elaine glanced at the jury. "A bond built on loyalty, ladies and gentlemen, stronger than fear." The defense rose next. Miles Grayson shuffled his papers. "Officer Hale, surely you understand that attributing investigative capability to an animal is sentimental? Isn't it true that you could be projecting human intention onto instinct?" Ryan didn't flinch. "Maybe, but that instinct saved lives, and I've learned that sometimes instinct is just another word for truth." A quiet ripple moved through the room. The judge raised a brow, suppressing what might have been the smallest hint of approval. The trial continued for hours. Evidence was presented: the photos from the cabin, the voice recordings, the bullet casing found at the cemetery. Every piece was laid bare until the weight of proof became impossible to ignore. When Elaine finally rested her case, she said softly, "Your Honor, I believe even the scars on that dog speak louder than the defendant's excuses." Outside, the snow began to fall again, blanketing the courthouse steps. Inside, the jury returned after deliberation. The foreman, a middle-aged teacher with nervous hands, stood and spoke clearly. "We find the defendant, Paul Danner, guilty on all counts: illegal trafficking, animal cruelty, and attempted murder." The room erupted in applause before the gavel brought silence again. Danner slumped in his seat, his last shred of arrogance gone. Ryan sat motionless, only his hand resting on Duke's head, fingers trembling with quiet relief. Then, unexpectedly, Judge Keller turned to the audience. "Before we close this session, there's someone who asked to say a few words." All eyes shifted as Arthur Blake rose from the second row. The old veteran wore his formal military jacket, metals faintly clinking as he walked to the stand. His posture, once burdened by war and memory, was straight again. "Your Honor," he began, voice low but clear, "I'm not here as a witness or a hero. I'm here as a man who thought his time had passed. When I found that dog dying, I figured maybe saving him was my last good deed, but I was wrong." He paused, glancing at Duke, who met his gaze with soft amber eyes. "Because I didn't just save him, he saved me. Taught me that even broken things can trust again, taught me that love doesn't end where pain begins." The courtroom was still, even the cameras lowered. Arthur swallowed hard. "So, if anyone's asking what $20 is worth, it's worth a second chance. For all of us." The audience stood, applause swelling until it echoed through the marble halls. Ryan bowed his head slightly, emotion tightening his chest. Judge Keller struck her gavel once, but couldn't hide her smile. "Well said, Mr. Blake." Outside the courthouse, the snow had thickened into gentle flakes. Reporters surrounded Ryan as he stepped onto the steps with Duke at his side. Flashbulbs went off in bursts, and one headline already printed on the afternoon edition fluttered in the wind. "The $20 dog who solved a crime." Ryan glanced down at Duke, whose ears twitched at the noise. "You ready for your spotlight, buddy?" he murmured. Duke barked once, tail wagging, as if answering yes. Across the street, Arthur and Eli stood watching. Eli held a small envelope in his gloved hands, the scholarship letter from the Police Youth Foundation, awarded for his bravery in helping alert authorities during the early investigation. His eyes glowed with pride. Arthur patted his shoulder. "Looks like we've both got second chances, huh?" Eli grinned. "Guess so. Maybe one day I'll be a cop like Ryan, maybe with a dog like Duke." Arthur chuckled. "Then you'll do just fine, kid." As the sun began to set, the three of them, the officer, the old soldier, and the boy, stood watching the courthouse lights fade into gold beneath the snowfall. And, for the first time, Silver Ridge felt whole again. Spring thawed the last snow from the mountains around Silver Ridge, leaving the valleys alive with the scent of pine and wet earth. The town, once haunted by gunfire and grief, had found something new to rally around. On the edge of the old forest road, where the ruins of an abandoned ranger outpost once stood, a new wooden sign had been raised. Camp Duke, K-9, Rescue and Training Center. The idea had been Ryan's, born in the quiet hours after the trial. He couldn't shake the feeling that the story of Duke shouldn't end with a courtroom headline. Too many service dogs were left behind, retired, injured, or forgotten after years of loyalty. He wanted to build a place where those dogs could heal, retrain, and help others do the same. Ryan stood by the gate on opening day, his navy jacket replaced by a simple brown field coat. He looked more at peace now, though the faint scar on his shoulder remained visible beneath the collar. The wind carried the sounds of barking from the training field behind him. Strong, clear, full of life. Beside him, Duke trotted happily, wearing his new harness engraved with silver letters, "Found, not lost." The scar along his side had faded into a faint ridge, barely visible under the golden sheen of his fur. Arthur Blake arrived next, stepping out of a pickup truck with a slow but steady gait. He wore his old military jacket, medals polished and pinned to his chest, though he'd traded his usual stoicism for a quiet smile. "You sure about this, officer?" he asked, glancing up at the sign. Ryan smiled. "It's not just mine anymore, Arthur. It's ours." Arthur looked at the large open space. Fenced fields, small kennels, a cabin built near the woods. "Never thought I'd see a place like this again," he murmured. "Not after the war. Feels like redemption." "That's exactly what it is," Ryan said. "And I can't think of anyone better than you to teach these dogs, and maybe the vets who train with them, how to trust again." Arthur chuckled softly. "Guess I'll have to start learning too." A group of volunteers gathered near the pens. a mix of police officers, young handlers, and former soldiers. Among them was Eli, now 15, taller, his once nervous energy replaced with quiet determination. He wore a denim jacket with a stitched patch that read Junior Trainer. His hands gently brushed the back of a small shepherd puppy with mismatched ears. "Easy, Luna," he whispered. "You're safe here." When he saw Ryan and Arthur, Eli waved. "We're ready for the next group." Ryan nodded and walked over. "Looks like you've already got the hang of things." Eli grinned. "I've been watching Duke. He's the best teacher." Duke barked as if in agreement, tail sweeping the dirt. The first group of rescues arrived that morning. 6 canines from across the state, each with a different history. One had been abandoned after injury, another retired early from a Toshine police department that couldn't afford care, and a few rescued from illegal training operations. They were wary, nervous, their eyes flicking to every movement. Ryan approached slowly, letting Duke lead. The old shepherd moved with calm assurance, tail low, posture relaxed. The other dogs watched him, sniffing the air. Within minutes, the tension eased. One limped forward, nudging Duke's shoulder. The moment was small, but powerful. The silent understanding between those who had known fear and survived it. Arthur leaned on the fence, his voice quiet. "He's a natural leader, that one. Some dogs follow commands. He follows purpose." Ryan smiled. "Maybe he learned that from us." Throughout the day, they worked side by side, Arthur teaching the volunteers discipline and calm handling, Eli helping socialize the pups, and Ryan overseeing the Foundation's operations. By evening, the camp glowed with the warmth of lanterns. The dogs rested in their new shelters, their breathing soft and steady under the starlight. Inside the main cabin, Arthur poured 2 cups of coffee and handed one to Ryan. "You ever think you'd end up running a place like this?" Ryan chuckled. "Never, but I can't think of anything else I'd rather do." Arthur stared into his cup. "You know, when I first found Duke, I thought I was saving a broken animal, but he was saving me from giving up. I think that's what this place will do, not just for the dogs, but for the people who come here." Ryan nodded. "You're right. They'll teach us how to start over." Outside, Eli was setting up his camera on a tripod, the lens glinting under the porch light. He adjusted the frame, then crouched beside Duke. "Okay, buddy," he said softly. "Ready to tell your story?" Arthur raised an eyebrow. "What's he doing?" Ryan smiled. "His own project. He's been filming a vlog, Duke's Legacy. He says it's to teach kindness, show how rescue dogs and people can help each other." Eli hit record. "Hey, everyone," he began, his voice bright but sincere. "I'm Eli, and this is Camp Duke. A few months ago, this dog helped save a whole town, but what he really saved was our hearts. If you're watching, remember, heroes don't always walk on 2 legs." Duke barked once, perfectly on cue. Eli laughed, rubbing his fur. "See? He agrees." By the time the video went online, it spread faster than anyone expected. Within days, letters and donations poured in from across the country. Families offered to adopt the rescued dogs. Veterans signed up to volunteer. Children sent drawings of Duke wearing a medal. Arthur watched the flood of envelopes arrive, shaking his head. Guess the world was waiting for a story like this. Ryan smiled. The world always needs reminders that good still wins. That evening, the 3 of them stood by the training field watching the sun sink behind the trees. The air was filled with the sounds of happy barking and laughter from volunteers. Arthur broke the silence. "You ever wonder why it had to happen this way? The pain, the loss, the fight?" Ryan looked at him, then at Duke sitting quietly between them. "Maybe because some stories need to be broken before they can be whole." Arthur nodded slowly. And some hearts, too. As twilight deepened, Eli turned the camera toward the horizon. The final frame of his vlog captured the 3 of them, the man who rebuilt trust, the boy who believed, and the dog who had never stopped loving. Across the top of the screen, he added a single caption before uploading. "This is where healing begins." A year passed since the snowstorm that had once nearly taken everything. Winter had returned to Silver Ridge, but this year it came softer, less a season of grief, more a season of remembrance. The town had changed. The air itself carried a gentler kind of silence, one filled with gratitude instead of ghosts. The morning sky hung pale and bright over the Hillcrest Military Cemetery, where rows of white crosses stretched across the valley like frozen waves. Ryan Hale stood before one of the memorial stones, his dark overcoat dusted with fresh snow, his gloved hands holding a wreath of cedar and blue ribbons. He was older in ways that didn't show, calmer, steadier, the kind of peace that comes only after walking through fire. Beside him, Duke sat upright, fur thick and silvered slightly around the muzzle, the faint scar along his flank now a quiet badge of survival. Arthur Blake stood nearby, wrapped in his formal veteran's coat, medals gleaming faintly beneath the gray light. His hair had turned whiter in the past year, but his eyes carried a warmth they hadn't known before. "Never thought I'd get used to this place again," he murmured. "But somehow it feels lighter today." Ryan nodded, setting the wreath gently at the base of the memorial. "Maybe that's what healing looks like. The weight doesn't go away, you just learn to carry it differently." Arthur smiled faintly. "And sometimes you share the load." The wind whispered through the pines. Snow drifted down in slow spirals, dusting Duke's back. The shepherd tilted his head, watching the flakes fall, his breath rising in steady puffs. Ryan reached down and rubbed his ear. "You still don't like the cold, huh, buddy?" Duke gave a quiet huff in response, then pressed his nose against Ryan's gloved hand. A few yards away, Eli stood with a small wooden plaque in his hands. Now 16, taller and sure of himself, he wore his academy trainee jacket, navy blue with a patch that read Future K-9 Officer Program. His cheeks were red from the cold, but his grin was bright as ever. "Mr. Blake," he called. "You ready?" Arthur walked over, his boots crunching through the snow. "Yeah, son, let's do it." Together, they placed the plaque into the frozen earth beside the path. The carved letters caught the pale light. "No life is ever useless, only miracles waiting to be found." Arthur stepped back, eyes misting. There. That's for all of them. The ones who never made it home and the ones who did. Ryan stood beside him, his voice soft. "It's perfect." He looked at the boy, then at the old man. "You know, I thought I'd lost a partner that winter. Turns out I found a family instead." Arthur chuckled, his voice rough with emotion. "That's what $20 can buy you if you spend it right." Eli laughed, shaking his head. "Best $20 in history." The three of them stood there for a moment. 3 generations bound not by blood, but by choice. Snow fell around them, coating their shoulders, their hats, the ground where sacrifice met renewal. Duke barked softly, as if adding his agreement to the unspoken truth that lingered in the air. After the ceremony, they walked back toward the truck parked near the gates. Ryan turned to take one last look at the cemetery. The wind carried the faint scent of pine and cedar, and for a heartbeat, he could almost hear the echoes of every soul who had once served, every life that had fought to matter. Back at Camp Duke, the world was alive with motion. Volunteers in thick winter coats shoveled snow from the training paths while several dogs ran across the field, their barks echoing in the cold air. The camp had grown. New kennels, a classroom cabin, and a large wooden sign painted with fresh white letters, a place for healing, for both ends of the leash. Eli jogged ahead with Duke at his side. "You know," he said breathlessly, "the scholarship board called this morning. They approved my full ride for next fall. Police Academy, K-9 Division." Ryan grinned, pride flickering across his face. "Guess I'll be the one calling you officer soon." Eli flushed. "Not yet, sir. Still a few tests away. But I think Duke's already training me." Arthur smirked. "You mean you're training him?" Eli laughed. "You sure about that?" Duke barked twice, as if to prove the point, making all 3 of them laugh. Inside the main cabin, a large corkboard displayed letters, photos, and newspaper clippings. One headline read, "Camp Duke, named National Symbol of Loyalty and Recovery." Another photo showed Arthur shaking hands with a state senator during a veteran outreach event. Ryan added a new picture to the board, a snapshot from that morning at the cemetery. Beneath it, he wrote in small block letters, "The $20 Miracle." That evening, the camp lights glowed softly against the snow. The smell of stew filled the air from the cabin kitchen. Volunteers gathered around the fire pit, laughter mixing with the howls of distant coyotes. Arthur sat in a wooden chair near the flames, Duke's head resting on his knee. "You ever think about how it all started?" he asked. Ryan poked at the fire with a stick. "A rusty sign, $20. A dog that refused to die. Arthur nodded. And look where that got us. You built a home for the forgotten. Eli, sitting cross-legged near the fire, looked up from his camera. Actually, he said, we built it. You, me, Duke, Mr. Hale, it's all of us. Ryan smiled. Then you'd better make sure that camera of yours keeps recording. The world needs stories like this. Eli tilted his lens toward the firelight, capturing the warm glow across their faces. Already rolling. I'm calling this one the $20 Miracle. Arthur chuckled. Catchy. The camera panned slowly, from the flickering flames to the smiling faces, to Duke curled peacefully. Between them, snow drifted in gentle waves beyond the fence, and somewhere in the distance a church bell rang, echoing through the valley like a blessing. Ryan lifted his cup of coffee toward the fire. To second chances, he said quietly. Arthur raised his tin mug. To family. Eli lifted his own. To miracles that don't cost much, but mean everything. Duke barked once, sharp and bright, like punctuation to a prayer. The fire crackled, sparks dancing up into the night sky until they vanished among the stars. Sometimes God's miracles don't come with thunder or light. They come quietly, in the form of a wounded dog, a broken soldier, or a lost soul who chooses to love again. The $20 Miracle reminds us that no life is useless, no act of kindness too small. When we show compassion, we become part of God's work, restoring what the world tried to break. Maybe today, your $20 miracle is waiting just outside your door, a chance to forgive, to help, or to love without expecting anything in return. Because when we give from the heart, heaven always gives back in ways we cannot imagine. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment below, write Amen if you believe miracles still happen, and may God bless you and your loved ones with peace, faith, and second chances. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of faith, kindness, and the incredible ways God still moves among us.